wasn't Hamas democratically elected?
Yeah, like 17 years ago. But I mean, they're.
Well, why don't the Palestinians? I always wonder, why don't the Palestinians help us in? I mean, if anyone hurts the Palestinians, it's Hamas. Like,
and that's where I disagree, because I think
really,
I think this is where we've fallen for the manipulation of the IDF.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's show. My name is Jacob Hansen. I'm the host of Thoughtful Faith, and joining me today is my good friend Kwaku L. Kwaku, looking good as always.
Thank you.
Now, for anyone who's been living under a rock and is totally unfamiliar with the Latter-day Saint online sort of social media sphere, tell everyone a little bit about who you are.
Just a guy who I just kind of put my opinion out there sometimes. I was a host on Saints Unscripted. I was a host on the short-lived Stone 16 show, and This Is the Show. We won't give the acronym for that. And I'm a recurring guest on Ward Radio. And I've been pretty vocal about this subject. So Jacob said, let's have him on, because Jacob likes to have on every controversial person that he can possibly. Next, I think it's going to be Tim Ballard and Julie Rowe. So I'll watch it.
Well, when I'm not being controversial, I have to have someone else on who is being controversial. That's the way we get people to watch, right?
Exactly.
Well, hey, no, obviously the big subject, I've actually been struggling lately because I've been wanting to make videos about kind of the normal stuff, but with like the conversation right now that everyone's talking about, it's all over the news all the time, is the whole Israel and Palestine situation. And you obviously have been very involved in that conversation, probably with a pretty different perspective from my own. And I know that like Cardin and some of them kind of approached you on it, but I wanted to give you more of a full chance to lay out your thoughts on this whole situation. And then I'm going to listen to it, but then I'm going to kind of, I guess, sort of represent what I think are some of the questions that people have about your point of view. I might ask you things that have you considered this or that, or how do you reconcile this or that, and kind of go that way. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Then, so just to start off, I'll just throw out the big question. So right now we got the whole conflict that's going on. What's your overall take on the situation?
So my take is that the people in our country, specifically the people on the right, are jumping headfirst into this conflict, and they're picking the side that the media is telling them to pick. I think we need to be very cognizant of when the war drums are being banged. We want to make sure we learned from 2001, from the invasion of Iraq. And what we're seeing is the exact same propaganda being used by the U.S. military and by Israel to get us to be excited about and support a war, even though now we have more information that the genesis of this initial conflict, as of October 7th now, is not what we were told a couple weeks ago. We're finding new information about this every single day, and we're realizing that both sides are being dishonest. So my question is, why is the left and the right-wing media jumping full steam ahead to say support Israel no matter what? I think if we're going to be intelligent, we need to take a step back, and we need to ask the question, are we being manipulated? Are we being told the truth? And how many civilians are being killed in this conflict? We need to ask the question, what is Israel's goal? And we also need to ask the question, is Israel really our ally? I mean, does Israel view this land as the most important thing, even if it hurts the United States? There's a lot of relevant questions that are not being asked by the right wing or the left wing, and you're being called anti-Semitic if you even ask these questions.
Okay, so just before we go into another point, I want to kind of see if I can maybe put forth my understanding of what's going on and what the genesis of all this is. Now, I want to first of all take the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Obviously, that is something that has been going on for a very long time. But right. This whole thing all went crazy on October 7th when Hamas terrorists crossed the border, went into Israel, indiscriminately killing men, women, and children, people at a music festival, essentially launched a massive terror attack on Israel. And then now Israel's goal, if you want to know, okay, what are the goals, is to go in and destroy Hamas and completely make it so Hamas is no longer a threat. Now that, from my perspective, is what is behind at least what's going on right now in the specific. Obviously, we could go into the proximal causes going back all the way to 1948 and beyond, right? And so I guess I'm kind of sitting here wondering, like, is there anything missing in that aspect of it, or is it all in the history before? Like you say that there's the genesis isn't what we think it is. Am I wrong? Are people wrong?
Well, before I even say anything further, you have to say this. I feel like Dave Chappelle on SNL when he had to hold up the piece of paper. I denounce anti, and he's like, Kanye, that's how you do it. I want to be clear. Nobody in the right mind is supporting what Hamas is doing. Nobody in the right mind is okay with or finds it acceptable or moral.
Let's say no sane person. There are people out there who do, but they're nuts.
Yeah. Okay. No sane or moral person is okay with that. But in that same vein, you have sane and moral people who are not okay with the way the occupation led to that, but they feel they can't say that publicly. So to pretend as if this whole situation really began on October 7th, I think is doing a disservice to both Israel and Palestine.
Okay, so you are saying, just I'm trying to keep everything as clear as possible. So what you're saying though is that we have to look and go back before October 7th and take that into account. Those who are just thinking of October 7th, everyone kind of agrees October 7th was a horrible, horrible thing. But it's sort of like you're saying, yeah, that's a horrible, horrible thing. But we have to recognize that maybe that there were things that led up to that happening. Not saying that that was justified. Like, let me use an analogy and see what you think of it. Native Americans had their lands. Essentially, there's some complexness in that, but I would say more or less they were taken over their lands by the Western powers, okay, by the United States and by others before that. Anyway, and so these powers moved in, displaced Native peoples, put them on reservations essentially. And people look at that and are kind of like, yeah, that's kind of messed up, right? Like people kind of have at least some sort of a like that wasn't okay. But then let's say that now later, or let's say that the Native Americans came out of their reservation, killed a bunch of white settlers and, women, children, the whole bit, did something horrible. We would all condemn what happened, but then we have to, people would still say, well, maybe the reason they're so mad is because there's some real injustice behind this, right? Looking more to the roots of the problem rather than just this one thing that happened. Is that a fair summation of kind of the way you're viewing that?
Well, yeah, sort of. I think a better example would be the Warsaw Ghetto uprisings, right? Obviously, if you're looking at this from Germany's perspective, you're going, I can't believe that these people in Warsaw, Poland would do this. They would come in and attack Germans. Some of these Germans they were just living their lives. It's totally, unfair for them to do that. Well, obviously nobody's going to condone killing innocent Germans, but at the same time, to make this worse than the occupation beforehand, to make this worse than the persecution of the Jews, that to me seems it's a total disservice to history.
So it does seem that the real issue, the heart of this issue, comes down to, and you're using the language of the occupation, right? And that implies that the state of Israel is an illegitimate state. They are occupying land that doesn't belong to them. Is that kind of the position that you would take on it?
I mean, yeah. I mean, a number of people and countries don't recognize Israel as a legitimate state. Now, I don't think I'm not saying they're an illegitimate state, so Hamas is correct to do X, Y, Z.
Correct. I agree. Yeah,
but that's
obviously not. But if let's just do this then. Let's just take Hamas out of this equation right now, just for the sake of what's going on. I don't think we can in real life, but just for the sake of the conversation right now, if October 7th had never happened, what is the position of people on the whole Israel-Palestine situation, which is where you're kind of taking the conversation here. And there is the ultimate, like, there's two sides to it. Those who think that the state of Israel is an occupying force in the land of Palestine, right? Or that the state of Israel is a legitimate state, and that those who are trying to destroy it or say that it's illegitimate or dismantle it, whether peacefully or non-peacefully, are in the wrong, and that state is a sovereign state with all the rights that go with a sovereign state. Is that the right way to frame the viewpoint between you and I? Because I would actually say that if it was 1948, I actually would probably be on your side. I'd say, I don't think we should go in and create a state in the midst of this land that is primarily been controlled by Arabic Muslims for the past 1,000 years, right? So I can get that. But with that said, there have been multiple wars fought over this land, and basically Israel won. And at what point, like with the Native Americans, at what point do you say, I'm not giving Utah back to the Native Americans?
Right. Yeah. So I see the point there. The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we the ones who get to determine when the Palestinians say, okay, it's yours now, or are they? Because it seems as if we're putting our parameters on them as to when they should be okay with giving up their homes. I mean,
I would say, here's the thing. I would kind of agree with you, but you know how usually that gets settled? By some other force totally destroying you and like subjugating you. Like historically, that's how conquest worked. We're trying to say, don't go and kill all the Palestinians outright in a genocide.
That's not what our government's saying. So our government, by supplying Israel with billions of dollars in weaponry, we have chosen the side of go kill the Palestinians. And so when people say, hey, this is an ethnic cleansing, not a war, I would have to agree. One side has an army, the other side doesn't. Palestinians don't have an army. The Gaza Strip, I mean, it is a rogue militia. Hamas. These are not.
Yeah, it's not an organized military. They're in poverty. All that kind of stuff exists.
Well-funded militaries on the entire.
Agreed. Israel is really, really tough, and the reason why is because we see that Israel is a sovereign state with the right to defend itself, and obviously that's just the fundamental disagreement, right? And we want to support that state in being able to exist from any forces who are trying to oppose it. And if indeed, and I'm just giving a perspective here, I don't necessarily want to, and while I do tend to agree with this perspective, I don't see, like, if it was an ethnic cleansing, if Israel wanted to wipe Gaza from the face of the earth, they could do it a lot more efficiently and easily than what they're doing now. They don't have to make warning calls to say, hey, get the civilians out of the building, all that kind of stuff. They could just level that place in about a week. I mean, to the ground. So, and they're not doing that. So my thing is if it was a genocide, they would behave differently than what they're doing.
Well, I don't think a genocide stops being a genocide because there's possibly a worse genocide around the corner, right? I mean, the Armenian genocide isn't less of a genocide just because the Holocaust, you know what I mean? It doesn't, like we have seen thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Palestinians killed by Israel before October of this year. And it's been happening for 70 plus years. What we've seen in the past 2 weeks alone, the numbers coming out from both Israel and Palestine, over 10,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. That's not all Hamas. And no, those are not all children being used as shields by Hamas. So yes, our government has decided to side with Israel here, but I don't know why we were making that the barometer for a moral choice. Our government has made the wrong decision many times. We were
Of
wrong
course,
to go into Iraq.
I wouldn't
We,
use our
yeah.
government as the one to make the moral choice.
I mean,
With that said,
Lockheed and Raytheon and these military companies, they're making a lot of money, and of course they want this war because they make money from it. But as members of the church, as Latter-day Saints, we need to take a step back and we need to say, okay, is this morally right?
well,
Are we treating Palestinians as if they're disposable?
one of the things that a lot of, and you'll like this, but others won't in the church, is the church's statement that they came out with about the violence going on in the Middle East. And I'm actually going to read it real quick because I want people to listen to this and tell me if it takes a side. Because the church says, a message from the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are devastated by the recent eruption of violence and loss of life in the Middle East. Violence of this nature is abhorrent to us and is not in harmony with the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is a gospel of peace. At such times, our hearts ache for all victims of this atrocity. As servants of God, we affirm he calls upon all of us to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we pray for a peaceful resolution of all conflicts. That was not a no condemnation of Hamas, no direct support of Israel and its rights to do that. I was sort of shocked to some extent, but the church does like to err on the side of political neutrality. But I think a lot of people were upset by that statement. I don't think you were. I think you were much more pleased with that statement.
Well, I mean, you contrast that with a lot of other churches' statements where they just immediately posted the exact same screenshotted "Pray for Israel" meme that was going around, and our church didn't do that. I respect that because our church teaches that we're all children of God with inherent equal value. And if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was to go out and say, actually, we side with this military, it's an affront to our beliefs. So I think it was the right choice. And the church did the same thing in Russia and Ukraine. We had a lot of people calling angrily saying the church needs to denounce Russia. The church needs to denounce Russia. Russia's the aggressor. And the church still stayed out of it. They said, we are against violence on all sides. Turns out it was an invasion. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is not a perfect sovereign democracy either, and so these things are incredibly complicated. I like what the church did. I think that's the right thing to do. Now let's take that and apply it to the way we should be looking at this perspective. And we need to ask, are we treating or thinking about Palestinians as if they're disposable? And I think the majority of I won't say the majority of Americans, the majority of people, at least I've seen in the Latter-day Saint circle online, are treating Palestinians as if they're disposable for a greater cause. And I can't think of anything like less Christ-like than that.
I definitely approach this with a great deal of so I got to kind of be careful here because there's going to be a lot of people watching and being like, you need to like rip into Kwaku. And I'm kind of like, yeah, here's the thing. I have immense empathy. I have much more, my take is much more similar to what the church is saying. It's like, this is a mess. Okay. The creation of the state of Israel, in my opinion, was something that imposed something bad on the Palestinian people. However, I think the Palestinians lost ultimately in those wars. I do believe that Israel is a sovereign state with a right to defend itself. But I look at things like the talk of Israel as an occupation, right? I obviously disagree with that, but I want to kind of ask you, okay, so if the state of Israel is an occupying force that's kind of at the root of these problems ultimately, and you want to end the occupation and free Palestine, and I asked you this on Twitter, it's sort of like, what does that mean? Are you saying you want to completely get rid of the state of Israel? Like, what is this freeing Palestine and ending the occupation look like?
So I believe in a two-state solution. Okay. I would love to see a two-state solution happen. We don't get this fantasy land where all of the Palestinians will inherit that entire area back, and all of the people in Israel are going to get up and move to Boca Raton. Like, neither of those things are going to happen. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So it is messy, and unfortunately, we have to deal with history as it is. We can't have this perfect world. So I do think we need a two-state solution. I do think Palestine deserves a lot of their land back, but I also think Israel deserves to stay intact and deserves to stay where it is. I do think giving up some land is probably going to be necessary, removing their military forces from Palestine. But then the second part of that is, what does the United States do, and what do our allies do to ensure a safe Palestine? What do we do to ensure that Hamas or any of the terrorist breeding grounds that are in Palestine don't just create something else? Because right now we're on that track. We're on the track to get rid of Hamas at the expense of tens of thousands being killed, perhaps hundreds of thousands being killed. But what happens in 30 years?
Yeah, and I'm
right. So we have to come up with a solution that actually involves keeping a safe Palestine, because the children of these dead fathers, we know what happens. We lived through Iraq. They're going to grow up and they're going to want blood. They're going to want revenge. So the long-term solution here hasn't even been thought out. We're just saying support Israel, but the implications of that are a lot of death and an unwinnable solution. I mean, the implications of that lead to a full-out Middle Eastern war, and we don't need any more of that. So I'm not someone who is going around college campuses holding up a Palestinian flag saying, Israel is illegitimate, get rid of it. I think that's insanity.
But here's my question though. On that, you say you're in favor of a two-state solution. So am I. I think most sane people are like, you guys got to figure this out. We need to figure out a way for you guys to each have what you need. But what do we do if the Palestinians simply refuse that solution and say, no, from the river to the sea, this is an occupation. I'm not, like, to be totally frank, and I can sort of see where they're coming from. If they came in and were like, hey, the UN came in and was like, hey, Jacob, you know what we're going to do in Nevada and Utah? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to divide up Nevada and Utah, and we're going to give a bunch of this to the Native Americans, and then we're going to give you guys just kind of this portion. And I would be like, and if this is like a Palestinian who has the UN coming in saying, we're going to create the state for the Jews because this is kind of their original homeland, whatever. Like, I'd be like, heck no. Like, from the Sierras to the Wasatch, the Great Basin will be free. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, I would teach my kids that. And I would say, we will fight this occupation to end it. So what do we do if the Palestinians simply refuse a two-state solution as a non-starter?
So I have two answers. The first answer to that is, obviously I don't hold elected office, right? I think that's an equivalent question to what is the Trinity? Well, for the past 2,000 years, people have been trying to figure that out, and no one's really given a great answer. Okay, people much smarter than both of us are in the Pentagon right now, twiddling their thumbs, saying, "What do we do?" The second answer to that is, Palestine doesn't really have a governing force right now. I mean, the reason we're saying it's
Hamas has essentially, wasn't Hamas democratically elected?
Yeah, like 17 years ago. But I mean, they're.
Well, why don't the Palestinians help us in? I mean, if anyone hurts the Palestinians, it's Hamas. Like,
and that's where I disagree, because I think I think this is where we've fallen for the manipulation of the IDF. I think it's overblown completely, and you can see this has been dropped in the headlines. They're not using this as much as they were the past 3 weeks. Hamas, all the dead Palestinian children are just being used as human shields by Hamas. It's a complete exaggeration. It's incredibly overblown.
I would never believe that every single one of them are a human shield. But I do think there is collateral damage in war. I think anytime you're going to have a battle like the one they're going to have in Gaza to try and root out Hamas, civilians in the thousands are going to die. It's just like that. You got to put that in the balance sheet of what you're going to do.
The narrative that we were being taught at first, that the media was pushing out and the IDF was pushing out, is that these dead Palestinian children are only dead because Hamas puts them at the front lines or uses them as human shields. We now know that is not true. So my next question is, the Hamas operatives, again, this is effectively a rogue militia. This is not some
funded
Hamas
by Iran.
Palestine. Okay, they're living in other countries, and
Funded
they're trying
by Iran.
right. And then we don't even want to think about how, yeah, you take down Hamas, who's waiting there? It's Hezbollah. Okay, and let me tell you, they're a lot tougher and they're a lot faster. So again, it's more bloodshed in the way. But we have to ask, okay, the Hamas operatives that are in Palestine right now, that are in Gaza, are wearing street clothes. They're hiding out. This is not this is not a planned strong military operation. So when we say Palestine needs to just give them Hamas, the Palestinians, for one, don't even know who is an official Hamas operative. Second, does that include anyone who's sympathetic to Hamas? Well, then we're running in a really difficult circle because, if you've seen,
I would say
water, the Palestinian Gaza water reserve was bombed by Israel yesterday. Okay, Hamas wasn't hiding in the water reserves, right? So from a Palestinian's perspective, they may not like Hamas. They may not have even voted for Hamas. If you're a teenager, you were born and they were elected. But Hamas is posturing themselves as your only line of defense. They've already seen what Israel's done to the civilians. Gaza is completely destroyed. I mean, there's mass death everywhere. The only people that have the actual means to fight back, the only people that actually have weaponry, and the only people that are coming forward and saying, look, we will protect your family right now, are Hamas, who are the terrorists. So the Palestinian people are not in this easy place where it's not a mob in Las Vegas where you can work with your neighborhood watch and point them out and figure out how to get them arrested. They are between a rock and a hard place. So Israel saying that they want to just take out Hamas, that equates to an ethnic cleansing because they're not differentiating between who is an actual Hamas terrorist, who is sympathetic to Hamas, who has worked with Hamas. That's all Hamas to them. We've even seen by the images.
Well, if I were to roll into Gaza in a Jeep as an IDF soldier and someone starts shooting at me, it doesn't matter if they're a Hamas operative or not. They're the bad guys. And frankly, what the Palestinians should do is demand, in my opinion, that Hamas surrender and that everyone in Gaza surrender and that they welcome in the IDF troops peacefully and that they work with the IDF to root out anyone who is involved in the attack. And then they negotiate and they get back all the hostages. That's the thing. Right now, they're hostages. We should be like the Palestinians should say, like, if the US was holding hostages right now, like you and I would be like, give them back their hostages. Like, what are we doing? I would be on the side, if I were a Palestinian, of surrender. I'd say we can't beat the Israeli military. Fighting them is insane. Let's surrender and negotiate terms to figure out a way to keep Israel from being killed by terrorists. And so the people who aren't surrendering right now, there should be a surrender demand from Israel to all of the people of Palestine in Gaza. And anyone who resists in any way or does not follow instructions will be considered an enemy combatant. And I think that's fair.
I think the mechanics that are far too messy. And I think they rely too much on this assumption that Israel is going to be playing fair. We got to remember, Benjamin Netanyahu is not a great leader. He is a liar and he's a manipulator. He is a borderline war criminal. He forced his way back into office. He's manipulated the people of Israel a lot. People of Israel don't even like Benjamin Netanyahu.
So if here's the thing, if the Israeli citizens came out with white flags, surrender or not Israeli, the Gazans came out with white flags saying we're going to help you find Hamas, like we want peace, and Israel began to kill Gazans, I would be on the side of the Gazans to defend them against the Israeli military. But the thing is that they're not doing that.
I can guarantee you, based off of the reports that have been coming out for the past 3 weeks, the IDF is making no differentiation between anybody who is claiming to be Hamas and who is claiming to be innocent. So if the mechanics were even in place, where the people of Gaza actually had a way to have a mass communication, because remember, Israel took out their internet, their cell phone. They can't communicate.
Which is standard practice in war.
They have no Wi-Fi.
To destroy the communication of your enemy is something that you do, and their infrastructure.
So we're demanding that they can somehow rally all of the innocents through the rubble without any form of mass communication. Whenever Palestinians get together in large groups, it's seen as an uprising and they're shot and killed. There's literally no way Palestinians right now can even come up with a solution to surrender. Every single time you've had any groups try to do this, they get massacred. Israel has not allowed for there to be any mechanics in place for this as possible, which is why we call it an ethnic cleansing.
So you're saying that the Israelis, if Gazans were to approach them with white flags surrendering, that they would kill them?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Do you have any evidence that they actually have done that they've killed Gazans who are actively trying to surrender to them?
Well, whenever there are Gazans in groups, they're shot and killed, right? I mean, this is
even if they're waving white flags saying we surrender.
Well, we're not sure where they're going to grab white flags, but you know, if they're saying peace, when they have their hands up, I mean, we've all seen the videos. We're talking groups of Gazans, hands up, saying we're not fighting, and they're getting gunned down. So
I'd have to see those. I don't know that I'd have to look at those cases individually. And I'm not, by the way, denying that Israelis have always done the right things. I myself have even posted things that are critical of the way that Israel has in the past and even now have maybe done things within all this that are wrong. War is messy. This sort of a long-term, ongoing war against Israel.
A war insinuates that both sides have an army.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I don't define it that way. And when I say war, I just mean when people are flying in with thousands of fighters to kill people, and they're armed with automatic weapons and rockets and things like that, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's a duck. That smells, sounds, and feels like a war.
Yeah, well, I mean, sort of. If Ted Bundy's militia attacked the Nevada, Capitol, it doesn't mean that all Idahoans should be gunned down, right? So, not Ted Bundy. Who's Cliven Bundy? Cliven Bundy. Not Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. That'd be that one. We might do it. We might.
And if you can go look up those videos, you can watch them. I am following a number of independent Palestinian journalists, but I have found so far that all of these arguments as to the mechanics as to how Palestine should proceed are based off of a narrative that Israel is doing what's fair and doing what's right and is being moral. But I don't think that's the case.
So what do you think the response should have been from Israel after the October 7th attack and the taking of something like 200 hostages? All right, you're the prime minister, or you're the great dictator of Israel. You can do whatever you want. What are you going to do? They just killed 1,500 people and took 200 hostage. What are you doing?
Well, again, there's a lot of political analysts who can give better answers than me. I would say that the first warnings we're going to invade Gaza are definitely fair. We're going to find Hamas. We don't want mass death. Please deliver us.
So you would actually have invaded Gaza.
Oh, well, not necessarily. I'll tell you, I would not have invaded the West Bank. They should not be in the West Bank, and they are.
Okay, that's fine. All right, fine. Whether they should go into that's something else. But you would, though, if that had happened, you don't necessarily oppose the invasion of Gaza.
Depending how you define invasion, the way they're doing the invasion, I think, is completely immoral.
So it's not necessarily a matter of the invasion itself. It's more a matter of the tactics that they're using that you have an issue with.
Absolutely.
So you believe that they should go in, get Hamas.
I'm not saying Israel should be pansies and they don't have a right to shoot back. I think that's insane. They definitely have a right to shoot back. But it's clear this is a land grab. And also, about 50% of the people that were killed on October 7th were military personnel. Okay, that information has only come out the past 3 days. A lot of these were military personnel, which makes me ask the question, how much about the October 7th massacre do we know? Because we're only getting that information out now. And again, that's not justified that the military personnel, that they should die. An attack on a music festival, that's all horrible. But at the same time, we were taught it was completely.
Well, if the Mexican cartels came across the border into the United States, to 200 citizens hostage, killed 1,500 people, but only 750 of those were civilians, you don't think that we'd be like sending the freaking the shit would hit the fan in right. in Mexico, okay? Like yes. If that happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but if we were, in Tijuana for 50 years taken over, I would understand why the cartel would have done that, right? So
really, again, so you would now. Are you saying that you understand why Hamas did what they did?
Well, I'm saying if you treat people like animals and you force them with nowhere to go and you keep them in open air prisons, people are going to go insane and terrorists will be created.
And so
ghetto uprisings, the Nat Turner Rebellion, this is standard throughout history. We can't be surprised that the people we're persecuting decide to fight back one day. And they may do it with the worst of the people among them. I think that's totally possible. It happens all throughout history. But the question is, do the innocents, right? Arabs have a lot more children than Americans. Americans aren't having kids.
Yeah, they have tons. Like isn't the average population in Gaza like 18 or something? It's like crazy low.
50% of Gaza are minors, okay? So these minors didn't elect Hamas. These minors are simply trying to survive with limited food, limited water, and now we're gunning them down. And we're saying we're going to keep gunning them down until you give us Hamas. They don't know who Hamas is. I mean, at this point, your dad that hates Israel is Hamas. The whole thing is undefinable, and it's all operating under this assumption and tactics that Israel's given us that are deliberately manipulative because they want a land grab. Israel will be completely fine expelling 100% of Palestinians, making them refugees to wander out the Middle East and take the whole land. That is what they want at the end of the day. Benjamin Netanyahu calls them animals. I mean, the culture of Israel is to treat these Palestinians as if they're animals. There's incredible discrimination and apartheid in the state. I just don't believe that this is a normal
isn't like 20% of Israel Arab Palestinian or Arab?
Yeah, I've heard different figures, but it's still apartheid. The Arabs there are treated pretty terribly. The Ethiopians in Israel are treated terribly. I mean, Israel is it is not the state we want it to be.
I don't know about the specifics of it. I don't, but I do know that we have to be very careful with the state of Israel because there's some other questions to be had about the state of Israel generally. You know what I mean? Like we generally believe in sort of a, here's the thing though. I have to go back to this though, because I can't help but be like, look, if cartels fired a single rocket into San Diego, the U.S. would be in there like, we wouldn't get let's get a good rocket defense system in San Diego, but stay on our side of the border. Like, we wouldn't put up with this crap in our country. We would not allow for American citizens ever to endure rocket attacks from our neighbors, right? Like, Israel has been, I believe, from my perspective, incredibly restrained against the, because remember the Palestinians, it is from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. The state of Israel is illegitimate. They're oppressing us. They're an occupying force. And so we're justified to shoot our rockets. And it's like from the Israeli perspective and even from my own, as an American, if I'm a sovereign American, in our country, when someone is shooting rockets at us, I would say, U.S. military, go get those guys and kill every single one of them. Like, and I think that that's justified to go get the bad guys. And if anyone stands in your way, yeah, take them out too.
So that's operating though under a presupposition that is totally foreign to what's happening. I mean, if the United States was taking over parts of Mexico forcefully, we would understand why that was happening. Okay, that would be a full-fledged war because Mexico has a military. That would be an actual war. It wouldn't be
Well, I'm
equal.
saying if it was from the cartels, let's say, to use a better analogy, right?
Okay, if it was from the cartels. Okay, still, why would the cartels do it? Is it just because
I would say, let's say that we beat Mexico in a war in San Diego is called San Diego for a reason. It's a Spanish settlement that was owned by Mexico that was given up to us after we beat them in a war. And frankly, the Palestinians have been beaten in a war by the Israelis multiple times, and Israel actually even was willing to cede land back to them. One of the things is that once you draw your border lines and you say, hey, we've taken this, we own this now, and if you try and mess with us, we're going to kill you. That's how you establish sovereign borders. To some extent, one of the problems with Israel, almost, the way I see it, is they've been too tolerant. Like, there just needs to be an understanding that, like,
I think it's totally backwards.
But again, that's because you assume that the Israel, like, I think when Israel took over the land that it took over, like,
with the help of the US and the British,
and you're right, with the help of the British and the UN, and I think that was wrong, right? I think that the conquest of the land of Palestine and the creation of the Israeli state was a problem, and that's the thing. It's like, all right, I think it was illegitimate, and so did all the Arabs around there, and so they all came to destroy Israel, but Israel won. And when you win the war and you draw the lines, at some point, I have to say,
you draw the lines. You don't keep drawing the lines, and that's what Israel's done the past 50 years. Is they keep drawing the lines over and over again to take more land, and they do it forcefully by killing civilians. I mean, people have raised this question so much. How come none of the other Arab states will take the Palestinians? And I ask, how come all the other Arab states hate Israel and say, no, they're evil, look what they've done?
Well, how much of that has to do with Islam and their alliance with the United States and all of that? This is a monkey that we, on the back of all of this. That
podcast.
What was that?
That might have to be a different podcast because that's going to be getting into the nature of Islam, and that's.
Well, maybe we'll do a part 2 in talking about it, because I also think that there is a factor. People like Sam Harris bring this up all the time, and I have my issues with Sam Harris, but there are a lot of people talking about the nature of Islam into this conflict and how it. But I will say, if we just stick to the political and nationalistic side of it, because not all Palestinians are Muslims either.
A lot of Christian churches are getting bombed.
You're right. So there is a. But the reality is that here's the way I see it. What happened in 1948, I was against. But the problem is that it's now been 70 years. Maybe the way that the Native Americans were treated 150, 200 years ago was wrong. But the problem is we live in the present, and there are 7 million Jews who live from the river to the sea. And if you're saying we're going to make this free, you better have a solution.
Well, so what does free mean? Free does not necessarily mean Israel's wiped off the map and that's all Palestine. What it means is the people in.
Is that what the Palestinians think?
Oh, a lot of Palestinians have explained this. They want to be able to leave Gaza. They want to be able to leave and come back and live in normal society. It's called an open air prison because they're stuck in. It's only been recently that Israel said, okay, you guys can leave. You need to leave now.
And maybe Israel is a little harsh about giving too much freedom to the people who are launching rockets at them. It's like, look, I would be a supporter
to keep people in an open air prison. They can't leave. They have no food or water. You are creating radicals.
And so, I think that you could say that Israel's treatment of Gaza
to take this as if it's somehow a moral good. People deserve to be free. People don't deserve to be trapped in a small border that is a prison. So that's what from the river to
peaceful protests. See, that's the thing is you lose the moral high ground in the West when you start killing people. In Arab culture, it's all about sort of like tough guy, gonna kill the enemy sort of thing. But if you want to gain the support of the West, you're not going to gain the support of the West by killing people. You're going to gain the support of the West by being the victim, actually. And if you are truly the victim, you just need to display that.
I hate to sound like too much of a radical here, but I mean, I disagree. the way you gain the West's attention is by killing. I mean, the West, we have killed millions of people since 2001.
No. If we go, if you're right, the attention you get is that we park 2 aircraft carriers off your coast. If you go and engage in a peaceful protest like Mahatma Gandhi or like Nelson Mandela or like all the other peaceful protesters, and you take the Christian route, the Christian peoples of the West, even if they're not Christian, they still have a Christian sort of moral consciousness. They will respond to your moral plight and your oppression. We aren't people that
I don't know. I think you're giving us too much credit. I'm not sure if I think that's the case.
Well, the biggest heroes we talk about, at least nowadays, aren't the conquering heroes. We talk about people like Gandhi, Mandela, and Martin Luther King, right?
Yeah, what happened to him? He got killed.
You're right.
He was arrested. We didn't treat those people like they were good. We hated them at the time. Only in hindsight did we revere them later on. So I don't think the West, our founding documents are wonderful and they're great ideas, but we don't implement them well. And right now, we're not this bastion of freedom and great ideas. We absolutely kill the peacemakers. Let's give an example, is a very recent example, okay? 2020, right?
Well, why are we holding Israel to the peacemaker standard, but not
because they're saying they are.
Gazans?
Because they're saying they are.
Or the other Arab nations that are launching rockets at them, including some of these groups who launched rockets at a family member of mine when he was deployed in Iraq.
Well, because Israel is saying, look, we are the Western representative here in the Middle East. We are your guys. We are doing things fairly. Pay no attention to Netanyahu behind the curtain.
Well, I wouldn't, and I agree with you that there certainly can be reasons to criticize Israel. I'm not a big, huge blind Israel supporter. I'm not some Nikki Haley nut job or something like that. I will say though that compared to who, you know what I'm saying? Like Israel has its issues, but Islamic jihadists in the Palestinian world, like there are 20% of the Israel's population is Arabic Muslims, but how many Jews live in Gaza? How many Jews live in the West Bank? Right? Like,
so I understand you're saying the dominant Islamic religion, the dominant view of Jewish people in Islam in the Middle East is in such a way where Jewish people cannot peacefully live there without being persecuted and targeted.
They'll kill you.
Right. Now, do you think this conflict is going to make that better or worse?
Well, here's the problem. I don't see. Okay, let me give you my solution. Okay, if they attack, I'm Netanyahu or I'm the dictator of Israel. I say, look, here's what we need to do. I do believe we need to do everything we can to get the civilians somewhere safe. I think we need to say, look, first of all, you all should surrender if you see us. Hands up, white flags, whole 9 yards. If you do that, we'll protect you. We'll consider you one of the good guys over there. You can identify yourself as a good guy in these ways. And then I would say you guys should all go to a refugee camp in this area. And then we're going to set up this camp. You come to the camp voluntarily. We'll take you in. We'll keep you safe. And then guess what? Anyone else who's out there, we're assuming you're an enemy combatant. You better get into the safe zone or else you're going to get destroyed. And then when we roll into that area, it's a war zone. It is, if you're here, you're going to die, and you take it over. Then what you do, once you've taken over all of Gaza, you negotiate with the Palestinians a new solution. And I think what you say is, look, every time a rocket shoots over that border into our land, and I would negotiate too, that the Palestinians get things that they want, right? This is a good faith negotiation. You get things that you want, but in exchange, rockets don't get shot into our land. Every time a rocket gets shot into our land, you lose this privilege, and then you lose another privilege. So I would put the emphasis on the Gazans to create peace in their land, and in exchange, the longer the peace goes without rockets and attacks being made on Israel, the more the privileges get extended because they can be trusted as a people to be a safe place that can be interacted with in civilized society.
I totally see what you're saying. I'm totally I would love that, but I think that's a fantasy land. They want Israel's blood. They view
Yes.
Israel as the Satan of the world. Okay.
Then they have to be,
I
then they
hope,
have to lose the privileges. It's their choice. I would
but
leave it to
that
the
is what
people. It's like, look, you either get to move towards peace and prosperity, or you get to move towards an open air prison. Which are you going to choose?
it's going to be neither. The open air prison, that is going to lead eventually to Hezbollah and the other Middle Eastern countries actually getting involved. Like this, there is no easy, sweet way out of this. I mean, this is going to be dark. This is going to make the French Revolution look like an entree, an appetizer. Okay. And by the way, I would be complete like if there was a vote tomorrow which says give Tooele to all of the Jews, and all of that part of Utah can go to 100%. Well, I will freaking go and build houses for them.
From the Sierra to the Wasatch, the Great Basin will be free.
I completely. Because here's the thing: Mormons in the Mountain West, we're not taught in our schools that Jews are bad or Jews are evil. Okay, we don't. It's not. Anti-Semitism isn't like
Maybe bringing them casseroles and talking about how we love the temple.
That's more of Southern Christians have more of an anti-Semitic. It's not even a thing for us. Okay, so I'm not one of these people that doesn't want them to have a place, but we really got to think. In these next 15, 20 years, this is not going to be a sweet, easy wrap up. Because what happens to people when you corner them and they have nothing left to lose is you create some of the most terrifying enemies.
To some extent, I agree with you, but that's sort of the problem. A conquest happened, okay, in the 1940s of that land. And the problem is in ancient times, when conquest was much more common because there was a lot more disputes over large pieces of land, what you did was you went in and you basically cleansed it of every person that wasn't on your side, and you subjugated anyone else who was left for this very reason. Because if you leave a large population of people that are that native population that still have some gumption and some fight in them, they will fight back and be a thorn in your side forever. And so you have to subjugate them. And Israel may have conquered them, that land, but then they didn't ever subjugate them and or expel them. And so now they're stuck where we got to figure out either a two-state solution or one of them has to win.
Well, I think the UN needs to actually do its job, and we need to make these promises. We have to come up with a two-state solution that also involves building up Palestine from the rubble. Like,
yeah, I do agree with that, but my thing is this. Here's my take on this two-state solution.
And we need to punish
you
Israel
want it, I
crimes.
want it, but I do not think the Palestinians want it. I just don't think they want it. And as long as they don't want it, there will be violence.
Well, I mean, and that may be the case, right? I don't know.
They're choosing either we're going to win or you're going to win. And I'm just kind of want to tell all the Palestinians, if it's they're going to win or you're going to win, they're going to win. The Jewish state will defeat because it's backed by the United States, and the United States is not going to sit by. Second of all, they have nuclear weapons and they will use them if you try and wipe them off the earth. So let me tell you something right now. Palestine will never own from the river to the sea without a nuclear war breaking out.
And the question is, nobody wants a nuclear war. Okay.
Yeah. The US will go in and wipe Gaza off the map itself if necessary to prevent a nuclear war.
So, but then what?
So the Palestinians need to deal with reality. They have two options: destruction, poverty, and death, or a two-state solution.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I think the Palestinians are hesitant to even hear a two-state solution because of the nature that's been offered in the past and the way it was manipulative. For example,
yeah, but they have no negotiating power.
Tired of hearing, hey, look, we'll give you this land back. Here are the stipulations. Israel doesn't follow the stipulations. The UN actually needs to hold Israel accountable for violating Geneva Convention laws and I can agree to that. I don't think that Israel has always treated the Palestinians fairly. I agree, but I would also say that completely violates the Geneva Convention, right? And we in the West, we're not actually holding Israel accountable for their crimes. So why should the Palestinians believe in?
I'll tell you why, because they have no other solution. I'm telling the Palestinians right now, you guys have lost. You have no negotiating power in the world of politics and land ownership in and geopolitics. It's about who has the bigger gun. And let me tell you right now, the U.S., Israel, and all of its allies will wipe you off the face of the earth. And so here's the thing. If you want peace, you have to negotiate with them and figure out what you can offer.
I'm not sure. Because that then gets us into a full-fledged world war with the entire Middle East.
We'll destroy them. The United States.
I don't think so.
The United States and its allies would roll Iran and all the rest of them.
We would lose a number of allies. It would be a complete mess. It
would be a mess. It'd be horrible. Obviously, we don't want that. That's the worst case scenario.
And then we've got, you have Mother Russia lurking, waiting for that.
We have. This is the whole thing. If they want to start, the Battle of Armageddon, like to try and save Gaza and save these little strips of land, I think they're out of their mind. But I think that's what they're literally willing to do. I don't think they want a two-state solution. And so if you don't want a two-state solution,
Israel wants all the land. Palestinians want a place to live. And
Israel had all the land, and then it gave it back. Israel took over all of these places during I think it was 1967 war. And then they were they negotiated a peace that involved them having land. So at the end of the day, it's like, if Israel wants this land, Israel could take it.
But to be fair, that was 20 years fresh. So that means you were a kid when the occupation began, and you were in college when they're saying you can have some of the. We have the luxury in the U.S. of at least being a couple hundred years separated from the initial, when we compare it to the Native Americans, okay, no one's alive. It's completely, this is a fresh wound. Okay. And our involvement in backing Israel is aligning us with whatever atrocities they commit. And now you've got Russia and you have China who are upset at that. This is not this easy, sweet.
I will say that, I don't have a ton of information on all of the. I have seen things here and there that I've been like, ooh, that doesn't sound good for Israel. Israel attacked one of the U.S. I think it was the USS Liberty. Like, one of our ships was attacked by Israel. Okay, it killed a bunch of American sailors. Yeah. So believe me, I know I'm a big Ben Shapiro follower and watcher, but whenever I hear Ben
allegiances to Israel, if exactly all America was destroyed tomorrow and Israel could exist, they would 100%.
Yes, of course. Granted, but to be fair, you and I as Latter-day Saints, if we had to choose between the church or America, we would choose the church, right? Like, our loyalty is higher to the church than to our national governments.
I don't think we would. If it was the temple or like Minnesota, kill all the we wouldn't do it. No, we would
not just the temple, but anyway,
turn the temples into public libraries to preserve all the people in it, for sure.
well, real quick though, we're getting out of time here. So let me just give you a chance to kind of sum up your feelings on this. What's your kind of final message that you want people to understand as they see you putting out your tweets online and things like that people find controversial? What do you hope they understand?
Well, the one thing is the most pro thing I am pro Palestinian civilians and the children. Where there's a lot of dead children. The videos are so horrific. And the minute we treat people as disposable, we've lost what it means to be human beings. And whatever faith you pretend to have, the minute you think, a million people or children are disposable, you don't have that faith. You're a fraud. And I don't want to be among the blood and sins of my generation. So that's where my heart is at. Second message is, we need to understand this is not an easy thing. This is going to eventually, this leads to the other Middle Eastern countries, and then it leads to Russia and China. I would prefer to have grandkids. And some people are so gung-ho on the tribalism and the teams and let's take them out. They don't realize what that means. It means mass death. Your life is no longer the same. Your kids get drafted, Jacob. It is not something we want. And so the gung-ho, let's go get those terrorists, attitude that George W. Bush gave us doesn't work anymore. And too many LDS people are still stuck in that early 2000s narrative that this is what's happening. No, it's a huge mess. So my heart's with the people because human life matters above all. I want the right wing to understand that, to actually be pro-human life when it not just when it's abortion with women, but when it's 1 million kids in Gaza. And second, we need to be hesitant and not just buy into whatever information or manipulation is coming out of the IDF, because that's how we're going to end up getting freaking nuked. That's how we're going to end up getting a bunch of Americans dead because we believe in just kowtowing, kissing the boot of Bibi Netanyahu, who's a total war criminal. So those are my those are really my two messages. It's really not anything that crazy. I want kids to live. I don't want us going into a war. And also, I just got back from LA. Can we freaking clean up LA and San Francisco instead of shoving all this money to wars that shouldn't concern us? I mean, good grief, Salt Lake City. What is it? They last year they stopped counting the amount of homeless people that died, that froze to death in Salt Lake City. They stopped counting at 160 last year.
Yeah, no, we have. Believe me, you're gonna. I am not believe me, like I said, I'm not a Nikki Haley conservative. I do believe that our involvement in foreign affairs need to be very measured and careful, because I think you're right that they can do that. Now, there are many things you said that obviously I disagree with, but I do think that there is something that you and I can agree on. And I hope all of us as Latter-day Saints can agree on as well. At the end of the day, our goal is peace. Now, what the pathway is to that peace, maybe we have disagreements about, but ultimately that has to be our goal. Anyone who, to your point, Kwaku, goes on the war path and gets this, that isn't thinking about how to get to peace, but that is thinking with hatred in their heart and with this vision of bloody conquest that is part of the natural man, I think is doing it wrong. The church has made its statement. We're praying for peace, the resolutions of these conflicts, the de-escalation paths that we can find in them. And I think that in all of this, that needs to be where we are trying to get, so that we can get a peace that lasts, because ultimately a fight, we're all brothers and sisters at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, the big thing that's missing in this is that, why are they killing each other at all? It's a failure to understand who they are. They're brothers and sisters. They're not, there doesn't need to be this hatred, and it's coming from inside of each of them individually, each of us individually. We need to get rid of these sorts of distinctions so that we can find ways to live in peace with one another.
Our mandate as members of the church is in the Doctrine and Covenants: renounce war, proclaim peace, turn the hearts of the fathers to the children to the fathers. This war is the exact opposite. Okay, I mean, we're literally bomb the crap out of them.
Well, I think wars in generally are the opposite of that, because they turn us against one another. So anyway, I'm about out of time, but Kwaku, thanks so much for coming on, man. We'll have to maybe do a round 2 to this, to talk about Islam. Maybe we'll do it as a live stream so we can get some other people involved in talking about it.
The religious aspect to this is important, and no one really wants to touch it.
Yep.
Because but it is the smoking. It's there.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm super down. So just let me know when, and I'll jump on.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Kwaku. Have a good night. So, do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.